studio by reporter Aldrin Sampear, who's been tracking this story for us. A very good afternoon to you, Aldrin. Thank you so much for joining us. What is of particular significance in those policy documents?
Well, I think something of interest for me is now this formalization that what the ANC is calling now for is the public to be involved in the ANC's leadership race. You know what the battle is now with the ANC's leadership race is that the public is not involved and there's a veil of secrecy around it, even in terms of campaigning. So what the ANC is proposing now is that let there be public participation, a form of like the primaries like we see in the United States and what we've seen with the DA as well, where members who are running for positions come out publicly, state their case and also state the manifestos, their manifestos in terms of how they want to drive the party forward and how they want to have an impact on the country, and the public will be allowed to make a comment on that or to scrutinize those manifestos, and obviously this will have an effect on how the ANC runs its succession race beyond 2015, rather beyond the 2017, because remember now you have the elective conference that's coming up in December. And whatever policies that are being made now, the proposals that are being made now won't affect the conference or the running of the current leadership race.
Okay. Now, still on that issue of vetting people nominated for leadership positions, do you think it's an indication of paranoia on the part of the current leadership when it comes to elections in the past?
You know, just reading through this document, for instance, it acknowledges that not any ANC member who joins or any person who joins the ANC is ready to lead, and that's an acknowledgement that there are some who have been elected to lead, and as Fikile Mbalula put it earlier on during the press briefing, some people are elected to lead and we don't even know who they are. So what this then does is that it deals with that issue, that you elect people who are known by the community, who are also known by ANC members, and this is something quite similar to what we saw during the run-up to the local government elections, where the communities got involved in which councillors the ANC puts forward for election, and of course which person becomes the mayor or which person becomes the mayoral candidate. But quite interestingly is that although you have that system, this is now in terms of the local government elections and getting the communities involved in who becomes councillors, that has already been tested before the local government elections, and we saw what happened in Tshwane. The ANC brought in Togo Didiza, and the people in Tshwane, some of them were not happy with that decision and they went onto a rampage. Remember the visuals that we were showing of Tshwane going up in flames because of that decision that the ANC had taken at the time. So it'd be quite interesting if this legislation or this policy is adopted, how they will be implementing that when the community is not happy with the candidate that's being put forward.
Now, the party is also proposing formalizing coalitions. Is this an indication of a party which does not trust itself come 2019, or are we going to be seeing more of a government ruled by coalitions?
What this is, it now signifies that the ANC acknowledges that its numbers are dwindling and coalition government might become a reality. The party might have to lead through coalition governments in various other areas, if not the country. We've seen what happened in Ekurhuleni. Ekurhuleni is currently run by the ANC, but it's run through a coalition. So what Ayanda Dlodlo, as she explained it, who's the subcommittee head of local governance, what she was speaking about, the ANC needs to make sure that it knows who it deploys to these areas. Which is something quite interesting. And also, the ANC needs to understand the issue around coalitions is that once you have a place like, let's say in Ekurhuleni, there's a decision that's being taken to go into this coalition in Ekurhuleni. What are some of the do's and what are some of the don'ts? What are some of the issues that the ANC will put on the table and say that we are not willing to compromise with this? We saw what happened during the local government elections where the EFF went to the ANC, or the ANC rather went to the EFF and said, let's talk coalitions. And the EFF made certain proposals, and Ayanda Dlodlo says now there needs to be a policy that is standard, that standardizes how the ANC goes into coalition government.
Now, the ANC has always been at pains decrying the loss of support over the years, and I mean, this has somewhat become rhetoric Because it's been saying such things since maybe after the 2014 general elections and after the local government elections last year. It has become such a rhetoric. So are you getting a sense that the party will deliver on the specifics as to how and when it will start mending its ways?
Well, we have to wait and see. Only time will tell whether these policies that are being introduced are enough to make sure that the ANC regains the lost ground, because that's quite a lot of emphasis that have been put in these documents about the ANC losing ground. But what exactly would the impact of these policies be? For instance, this proposal that the public be involved in who becomes the leader of the ANC, who becomes part of the leadership of the ANC, is quite interesting. They also make a proposal in saying that it seems as though that the ANC's NEC is bloated. Currently it has 86 members. Yeah. They want to cut that number down. They don't say by how many,
yeah.
But the other proposal on top of that in terms of the NEC is that they're saying that the NEC number should be cut down, but only 65% of NEC members should be allowed to be part of government, should be allowed to be part of the cabinet, to ensure that the leaders within the ANC are part of the permanent structures of the ANC and the day-to-day running of the party, and making sure that the party is in touch with the community members.
They've also mentioned the recovery of NSFAS bursaries and through roping in SARS. Do we know how that will happen?
Well, this is also another interesting proposal, because NSFAS has been raising this issue that it is issuing out loans or student loans, and students are supposed to pay the money back, and it has had a problem with recovering some of the money that has been lost. Naledi Pandor, who's the subcommittee chair on health and education, spoke about a study that has been done, and they found that there are some students or former students who are now in employment who want to pay back the money, but they don't know how to pay back the money. They don't know the process of paying back the money. And now with introducing SARS, it becomes an automated system. It means that once you have received money from SARS, you need to acknowledge, of course, rather once you have received money from NSFAS, and they say 40% of the money that we're giving to you will be bursary, and then the 60% will be a loan, so you need to pay that back. You need to acknowledge that once you start working and start earning a certain amount, SARS will then kick in, and SARS will be making deductions from your salary. So that should be interesting in terms of how that plays out going forward. Because even on the bigger picture, some people have been arguing that we need to understand why some people are not paying back the money. Is it because that the money that they earn is not huge enough to be paying back the loans?
Yeah.
Because there's also another concern that some people speak about, and analysts like Eusebius Mkhize, who speaks about black tax, because it is a reality that you find a person who comes from a poor background needs to make sure that he also looks after his family, looks after the siblings, and looks after the extended family as well. So how does that play into place?
And even Naledi Pandor also mentioned that most of these people, the reason they don't pay back the money is that nobody is contacting them, and they don't know how they will pay back the money. And they also mentioned about regulating faith-based organizations. Take us through that.
Was it last year when the Commission on Languages and Traditional Affairs was doing was having a conference where it invited an investigative conference where it invited these various faith-based organizations. We have seen reports of how faith-based organizations are being run. There's also issues around the finances of faith-based organizations. We've seen how those devotees of these faith-based organizations, in terms of arguments around that they're being abused. We've seen some eating grass, eating snakes, which they say taste like chomps. Now we see the ANC saying that let's regulate faith-based organizations. How exactly do you do that when you have the Constitution that tells us that you have a freedom of association? Even if your freedom of association is that you want to be part of this faith-based organization that's run in the manner that it's run, how do you make sure that that person's rights, constitutional rights, are not violated?
And how the CRL will feature in this regulation?
Yeah, definitely.
Right. Aldrin, as always, thank you so much for your time. That was our reporter, Aldrin Sampear. He's been covering the launch of the ANC 27 policies as the party gears towards its policy conference later on in June this year. All right, moving on to other news.